Hey, soy Isra García. Bienvenido a Disrupt Everything Podcast Series. Reinventarse a uno mismo, de todas las formas posibles. Utilizar ese 1% que marca la diferencia, enmarcar la diferencia y cambiarlo todo. Experimentar, intentar diferente, prototipar, despuntar, sobresalir de uno mismo y hacer accesible lo inaccesible. Hacer en la práctica lo que en la teoría parecía imposible. Destrozar perfecto y habilitar imposible. En este podcast encontrarás superhábitos, habilidades, núcleo, ultraproductividad, la calibración, optimización y sincronización de las 4 dimensiones del potencial humano: física, emocional, intelectual y espiritual. Entrevistas a los más grandes disruptores que he podido encontrar, que conozco y a los que puedo acceder. Grandes líderes de la talla de Robin Sharma, de la talla de Seth Godin, y personas completamente fuera del molde, fuera de la caja de la caja. Espero que lo disfrutes y que resuene contigo, que lo utilices, que lo aproveches, que lo maximices y que te suscribas, le des a la campana para que cuando haya nuevos episodios te notifiquen, que le des un like para poder alcanzar a más personas. Y cualquier duda, pregunta, petición, invitado, lo que sea, espero tu comentario porque lo vamos a tener muy en cuenta y tan pronto como pueda responderé. Gracias por tú, gracias por sobresalir y gracias por encontrar el riesgo antes de que el riesgo te encuentre a ti. Vamos a ello.
Bienvenidos a Disrupt Everything, podcast series by Isra García. Reinvéntate a ti mismo y cambia lo que más te importa.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode. And you guessed it, so I'm talking in English. It means that I have an international guest, an English spoken guest for a new episode 91. Can you believe it? It's been 91 episodes since I started in the middle of 2017. And it's been now 1.4 million listens, and also more than 55,000 downloads a month. And now we are here for talk about with a person that really made an impact on me, and a person that is now somehow disrupting the world, disrupting science, disrupting medicine, I would say, disrupting how we are ready to, tackle things as trauma, as as helping other people to, create better world. That's the main goal. Also, he's one of the first person I ever met that was completely vulnerable since the very beginning in all his sense. And also this really made a big impact on me, and this is why I think we resonated so much. He is David Champion, co-founder and director of Unlimited Sciences. David, thank you for being in Disrupt Everything podcast series.
Thank you, Isra, and thank you so much for the kind words. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
David is focused currently with Unlimited Science, a research nonprofit discovering how psilocybin can be safely used for healing and cognition. Prior, David was a co-founder and CPO at Baker Technologies, which he exceeded in a public offering after the company accomplished a valuation near 250 million. David received also a first-class master's in architecture from Cambridge University, and has a decade in experience building consumer technologies. He recently served as a campaign lead in the Denver psilocybin initiative, helping Denver become the first U.S. city to reform psilocybin policy. Also, his primary interests are behavioral data, digital art, user experience design, and mindfulness practices. David, what a curriculum, what accomplishments you've done in the recent years. How can we link, if we can put this in a timeline, what would you say that has been your biggest, most decisive, and also critical accomplishment or highlights or milestones, or since you were a child up until now?
What a beautiful first question. As you were asking that, what came to mind for me is a quote from Steve Jobs, which goes something like that you can always connect the dots looking backwards, but not looking forwards. And looking backwards, it's been incredible recently to really acknowledge how much each of those different chapters in my life has led me to where I am now and to the ability to do what I'm doing now. And for example, some people ask, well, you studied architecture and then actually worked in architecture briefly, but then shifted and moved into the technology space. And isn't that quite a big, drastic shift? And at first, I really agreed with their statement. And then as I thought about it more, I realized that there's actually a lot of similarities. The way that I learned architecture at Cambridge specifically is a type of education with architecture that trains us to think about not what a building would look like or necessarily where it sits on the skyline of a city or anything like that, but more, how does it make me feel when I'm in that building? How does the tall structure and the heavy stone walls of a cathedral make somebody feel in a mindset that's more reverent, maybe more patient, more compassionate, all these qualities that we would consider to be appropriate when in a religious monument. And that's an example I give where I translated a lot of those skills over to designing softwares on screen. So then if we fast forward to the cannabis industry, and in 2014, Colorado has recently legalized recreational and medical cannabis, and now we have dispensaries arriving, but there was sort of a chaos where a lot of people still felt like cannabis is a stigmatized topic, not something that they wanted to engage with publicly, something that could be a source of embarrassment or shame. And meanwhile, a lot of people were realizing that cannabis was the only medicine that could help them with certain symptoms, for example, back pain or nausea or insomnia, or any other of the list of medical ailments that we now know that CBD and other cannabis cannabinoids can help with. And so what I wanted to do was to design a user experience on the screen that would help people feel comfortable engaging legally with cannabis. So going to a dispensary was an inconvenient experience at the time. It was still something that felt like sort of an underground deal. And by building software that was nicely designed, that really took the user's experience in top priority, we were able to design a set of software tools that made it very comfortable and also safe and educational for people like mothers and business people and all types to be able to access cannabis as a medicine. So I give that as an example that really shows, I think, the dots as I look back are all connected, and there's no one accomplishment or marker that I would say is more important. I really enjoy the whole journey, the whole narrative that I've been on.
From all of these milestones of overall this journey you've been on, what would you say are the most or the most significant for you, the most significant moments that made you an impact, that make you change career, or made you more aware about you wanted to design user experience for the consumption of cannabis and then jump into psilocybin? What would you say that are these significant moments that make you rechange or rethink or redesign your journey?
Well, certainly, yeah. It would be remiss of me not to mention my own journeys with psychedelic compounds themselves, and maybe it's a conversation we can get into in in more depth. But this sort of personal access that I've experienced to understanding my experience of this life, my experience of being a human being that's conscious and aware, that I'm aware, is really only available to me in this in the current form, because I had access not just to the psychedelic experience, but I would also place a lot of emphasis on the ongoing practices that help integrate those psychedelic experiences, specifically meditation. I have a daily meditation practice that I've been running for about 4 or 5 years, and I think that that's one area I would give as an example where individual events that happened in my life have certainly made an impact, but the far greater impact has been coming from where I've decided to create daily practices, routines that keep me on course, keep my mind active, keep my body healthy, and keep the whole system working as one integrated unit. And I have to say that it's almost dangerous to give too much credit to any one psychedelic journey. For example, an ayahuasca ceremony over 2 nights that I held 2 years ago occurred right at the time where I was deciding to leave New York and to really say goodbye to a chapter of living there for 7 years, and to move to Denver to jump with 2 feet first into this opportunity to build a company in the cannabis space, which was still high risk and completely unknown, and we didn't necessarily know whether it would work, whether the cannabis industry would be ready for technology solutions. And with my awesome team, we were just doing the best we can. And this one ayahuasca ceremony that I was part of, I think it was 2 days. I think I went to the retreat center, which I won't mention the details of, but I went to the retreat center with this wonderful shaman and a small group of 12 people, and I had just packed up everything that I owned, and I gave away most of what I owned. I sold some things, and then I had one suitcase which was a carry-on, like a carry duffel bag, and I went to the retreat center, and I had my 2 evenings with 3 days of ayahuasca ceremony, guided and extremely powerful. And then with my bag in hand, I went straight to the airport and got on the plane the following day. And that's when I moved to Denver to start this new chapter of my life. And I felt like I had, shed my possessions, shed my old mindset, shed unserving belief systems, and I came into this new chapter really with a fresh canvas, ready to build from the start. And I think many of us can think about a time where we had to more or less start again from scratch, whether it's in business or often for me in any way from that one situation was after the loss of a relationship, a 4-year very committed relationship that came to an end, and I was in a heartbroken state of mind, and I was ready to sort of shed those layers and come to Denver really raw, really ready to start from the beginning, learning with a new set of friends and a new context.
And then David, you mentioned a really important deep daily practice that help you to to be ready to make a difference. Which daily practices can you mention a few of these daily practices you carry on?
Absolutely, yeah. The morning routine is something that I really enjoy, and for the last 2 years since I moved to Denver, right after that same event, I moved to Denver, and I really was in this mindset of concentrating on my heart, my mind, my body, and my morning routine was a really strong part of that. So 5:30 a.m., wake up, green juice, straight to the gym, hour to an hour and a half routine, and then cold shower for about 2 to 4 minutes, depending on when it was. Winter in Colorado, cold shower more fun. and then sitting on the meditation cushion, taking some time to ground, the meditation practice. And for a while also I was doing breath work in the morning, not necessarily a full ceremony or anything like that, but somewhat inspired from the Wim Hof methodology, just the 15-minute breathwork practice that sort of got the blood moving, gets the body oxygenated, and I found coming out of that so much energy, ready for the day. I'm happy to talk more about it, but maybe these are all practices and routines that your audience is already familiar about from
absolutely. It's one of the key topics of the podcast. So you can expand on this as you like.
Well, one thing I've started recently, which again I'm sure is very common and nothing new here, but I have to say that the morning journaling practice has been such a game changer for me recently, and I think that I kept resisting it. You know, there are these stats and facts about something like 80% of the most influential people in America in the last 100 years. They realized that these people also journaled every day, and you know, I knew these sort of stats, but I never could get myself to journal. And I think partly it was because I had this expectation that if my morning routine if I only had so much time in the morning, the time should be spent on physical activations, physical ways of getting my blood flowing, getting my mind working, you know, the energizing components of daily routine. And it's more recently, I would say in the last 6 to 12 months, I've chilled out a little bit. I'm not quite as strict and kind of harsh with myself in these daily routines. And I've also made time for much more on the spiritual, the emotional, and the cognitive level. And one area that's just so fundamental is daily journaling. And I think the hard part of that is that in my mind there was this expectation that a journal entry had to be a page of thoughtful, you know, almost poetic description of how I'm feeling in the day before. And I realized how starting small and just putting down one sentence to start with was enough. And often it would be very hard to stop after one sentence because I'd realized there were a few more sentences to say. And then next thing I knew, in just 10, 15 minutes, I had not only accessed a belief system or a way that I had been thinking the previous day, or maybe a way that I had responded to my girlfriend or to another person in my life who matters, and had some reflection on that, either positive or self-critical. But also I was able to process, and I am daily able to process some small nuance which otherwise I would just probably overlook and not even give two thoughts to, but some nuance will come to mind that can be an opportunity for me to tweak and to understand myself more fully. So that's an area that I'm really encouraging and enjoying a lot.
And how do you practice? What's your method for journaling?
Really, it's free writing. I don't correct anything. I don't go back and edit or even worry about grammar or anything like that too much. It's almost like sometimes the first 5 words make no sense and I don't even know why I'm writing them. I just start writing, and eventually it starts to fall into a pattern. Do you have any journaling techniques or practices you would share?
Exactly. It's really similar to what you described. I do, my journaling practice is thought dumping. I don't look back. I don't correct mistakes. I just write for 15 minutes, no matter what happens, no matter how many times I read it.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps me to
Yeah.
download sometimes useful information and sometimes not really useful information, but you download.
And you said that you write every day, right? Since 2012?
Exactly. Yeah. Every day for my blog. Every day I just write a piece of content about, anything that really stocks on me or interests me or is thought provoking, or it just happened. And it's just getting into the habit of writing, which is, I think, writing is pure emotion.
Mm.
Mm.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
What other daily practices you have? You have any special practices over the afternoon, before going to bed?
Well, my girlfriend and I, wonderful, beautiful Lana Bloom, is by my side a lot of the time. We recently moved into a new home, that's our first home together, and she's a designer and artist and product designer, and I'm a artist and used to be an architect. So together we have so much passion in designing and building this space around us, which is not just a spot to sleep or eat or to or even just a home, but also the sort of the context for a lot of the other things that we both create in life. And so we have a wonderful morning routine together.
Wow,
And
beautiful.
most of the items that I mentioned to you. And then in the evening, usually there's and obviously it's not every single day, but usually we have the practice of either reading to each other. We'll be in a fictional book reading, sometimes audiobook, but we also have this ongoing, maybe more relevant to talk about on the monthly context. We have a really powerful monthly ceremony with each other, which I would love to share. And it's an opportunity for each of us to feel completely heard in anything that we're experiencing in the relationship. And often, even in relationships that have great communication and really good listening skills, I think there's often a lot that's not said or not heard because there isn't quite the opening for it. And so we decided about a year ago, I think, to start doing this monthly practice where we take it in turns. And let's say that I'm going to share first. So Lana will lie down with her eyes closed, and the goal is that she doesn't even respond to what I'm saying. So you know how sometimes if you're talking to somebody and they're kind of saying yep, then your thought process can be slightly interrupted by that. And let alone, even if they're not saying anything, maybe they have facial expressions that are telling you that they're happy with what you're saying, or that they're not sure, or they're not happy with what you're saying. And then that can affect what you share as well. So I think there's a lot of these subtleties. And I'll put a bookmark in the topic of behavioral economics, which is where I started my first business in psychology and behavioral economics. So I'll come back to that in a moment, but really learning that these small facial expressions are interruptive to some conversations. And so what we decided was that, say, if I'm sharing, Lana will be lying down, eyes closed, no response. She doesn't have to make any facial expressions or smile or anything. And I'll sit for sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour, and just share. And usually we cover roughly the topics of career for each of us. We cover the topic of communication, topic of our love life, sex, and also the topic of what we're receiving from each other and how we want to receive. And really, it's one of the most powerful exercises or routines or communication styles I've experienced in any relationship. And it allows us to avoid the risk that anything goes unsaid or any resentment is built up for any longer than a month, because by the time, even if the day after that something happened and there was some issue, then within a month later it's being discussed and it's coming up to the surface. And we recently learned about deal making, this ability to make a request of our of the partner, and then to get into a really skillful conversation about how to agree on a new way of being. And it's just it will eradicate some of those irritations or the nagging or the daily sort of those gripes, those small things that get in between a relationship over the course of time. I highly recommend for your audience and for you, if you haven't heard of it, this wonderful author called Alison Armstrong. Alison Armstrong, she runs seminars and writes books, and her audiobooks are all on Audible. They're amazing, and really strong relationship advice. And
could you recommend us one or two books from Alison Armstrong that you have read felt powerful?
Yes. So the one I just mentioned, The Deal Making, is from a book called Celebrating Partnership. It's actually not a book, it's a recording of her live seminar with other couples. And so it's really powerful also to hear from her audience, how other couples are using these techniques or exercises, what issues are coming up. And then before that, we had listened to Understanding Women, which is, that title gets every man's ears perked up, right? I mean, we all want to understand women. But all of her books I'd really recommend listening to, as whether you're a man or a woman, and if you're in a relationship, I think it's great to listen or read them together so that you can share notes and sort of some of the differences that she points out between the way that masculine and the way that feminine respond in certain situations. And Lana and I would look at each other sort of like, wait, is that what you're thinking? And she would say, yeah, that's how I think about it. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that. And apparently all women in general will think about it in a different way than the way that most men will think about it. And so there's Understanding Women, and then the other one is called The Amazing Development of Men, and it talks about the man's journey, and it's pretty much ubiquitous across the world. Men, as they grow up, go through this journey from page to knight to prince to king, and there are various characteristics of each of those phases that characterize the stage in a man's development, and also how the female partner or another male partner can support that person in their journey.
I'm writing these topics, and I'm also listening, and I will put you on the show notes. David, you mentioned a meditation practice. Can you deconstruct your daily meditation practice?
I will, yeah. I have to say, my most successful daily meditation practice really occurred when I was meditating 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. And it's something that I would really like to get back to. So right now, I'm only meditating 10 to 15 minutes in the morning, every morning. I think really for me, the most important aspect of a meditation practice is that it's every day and not necessarily how long or what style or anything like that. I really think that every day, even if it's 1 minute or if it's 5 minutes, that's great. My 5-year-old nephew who lives in England is now meditating for, I think, 3 minutes every day, which is great. And so I really advocate for that. And I could talk about my current, like what I did this morning. I was using an app called Calm, CALM, which I think is a fantastic app. I've tried the others like Headspace and Oak, and Waking Up is a new one by Sam Harris, which has some really interesting philosophical lessons as well in the app. But I just like the app Calm, and also my girlfriend likes the voice of the person who's guiding the meditation sessions. So these are all really great resources. But personally, I have to say what I would like to move back to shortly here, probably as I come back from Burning Man this year, I'll be entering into a new phase, a new chapter of work and routines and that kind of thing. And I'll be probably just really either putting on silence or some very, very simple noise of, a stream or a river or something like that, and just a timer for 20 minutes. And I actually find that I can settle on my own awareness in a way that brings me to a state of presence that it's obviously very hard to describe because there's no me in that experience, but it's a state of awareness that in reflection afterwards I find is deeper and perhaps more nourishing to me than when I'm listening to a voice guiding the experience.
And David, what's your you have an important link, as you said, with psychedelics, and this is lead you to create a national and also worldwide initiative, as I said in the intro, helping Denver becoming the first U.S. city to reform psilocybin policy. For the listeners that still doesn't get familiar with psilocybin, can you start from the beginning with psilocybin and take us in a journey from psilocybin to how to heal and how to improve cognition until also your research with the Johns Hopkins Hospital. You did a collaboration, if I recall well.
Yeah.
Can you guide us in this journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, there's a lot to fit in. Let me see. The place to start is obviously psilocybin. It's a word that it's still hard to spell for most people, even as we work in the field daily. But psilocybin is the psychoactive compound contained in psychedelic mushrooms, and it's also a compound that can be produced synthetically in a laboratory. But if we take right now, there's no known count, but around a couple of thousand species of different mushrooms that grow all over the world have been discovered to contain psilocybin. And it's a compound that when we ingest it into our body, it creates an altered state of consciousness, is the way of putting it. So a psychoactive experience or an altered state of consciousness involves all manner of different outcomes. It can be everything from a slightly different feeling in your body to a slightly different way of seeing the world. Perhaps the actual vision that you have shifts slightly, and it can go quite deep to the extent that people are using psilocybin to repair trauma from their childhood and to overcome a number of different conditions that are now really a top priority for the research in this field, including depression, opioid and nicotine addiction, pain management, and even forms of trauma like also post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety. So there's a lot more to say on the medical benefits, and really that's the center of the work that we're doing, is to help people use this compound for better outcomes and in safer ways so that they can overcome these conditions which are so damaging to people's lives. And as you might know, opioid addiction, I think, is now the #1 cause of death in the USA, which should give us all pause to really consider how much of a priority it is if we think that psilocybin and potentially other psychoactive medicines can help with that condition. Then that alone is worth the work. But on top of that, there's this list and ever-growing list of other ailments and conditions that the medical environment is researching. So as you mentioned, we partnered with Johns Hopkins University, and they have run some world-leading studies with participants who come into their lab in Baltimore. And first, they're given a very extensive background screening, and it's really the top priority for the university to make sure that individuals who might be subject to have a challenging or a negative experience, for example, individuals who have any family history of schizophrenia or mental health disorders, are not admitted into these studies. But then once the participants are admitted, they go through at least 8 hours of sort of an onboarding one-on-one session, which helps them build comfort with the team and helps them really build safety and familiarity with the room where they're going to be using this substance, and that helps make sure that they're in a state of mind that can provide a powerful experience. And that I'll pause there to just segue into the state of mind and also the physical setting are two characteristics which in the community we call set and setting. So set and setting is like mindset and setting. And these two characteristics are absolutely the most crucial indicators of whether somebody will have a session with psilocybin that can be powerful and productive and something they can learn from, versus something that becomes quite unsuccessful and potentially even damaging for those people. And so this is where a lot of the work that we're doing with Unlimited Sciences is focused on how can we understand all of those variables, the qualities of set and setting, more deeply. For example, if you're about to sit in a place where you're going to be taking the psilocybin compound with a guide or a therapist who's by your side to make sure that you're safe and comfortable, there are so many qualities of the internal mindset that you might be harboring. For example, your belief system, your state of tiredness, the level of anxiety or trepidation that you have to the experience, or even the level of openness or excitement that you have. All of those mindset characteristics will make a difference. And then all of the characteristics of the physical setting, like the music that's being played and the colors of the room that you're in. And also, is the room familiar or is it a new room that you haven't been in before? Who are you with? There are so many, this is maybe 4 or 5 out of a list of thousands of different qualities and characteristics that we're doing the work to measure and to categorize. We are a data science company, I should say nonprofit. We're not a company, we're a fiscal sponsor of a 501c3 called Realm of Caring. So we are a nonprofit organization that is performing this work with the backing of our kind donors. And we're really, as a team of 6, all working with no personal compensation. This is our mission, to really pour our hearts into discovering how people can use psilocybin more safely and more productively for whatever the outcome is that they're looking for.
And David, you say something that I've been hearing a lot. Also in the book of Michael Pollan, Change Your Mind, How to Change Your Mind about the set and setting, and it's been said for the most with every expert or therapist or like authority in the field says that set and setting is the most important thing that they can define if it's damaging or if it's going to be healing and empowering. So from your personal experience and your professional experience, what would you say that are the most I would say optimal traits or characters or characteristics or features that we need to follow to have a proper set and setting?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I don't think we really know yet, and I really think that we're going to learn a lot with this project that we're doing. So the partnership with Johns Hopkins is to design a scientifically approved study that will really get to the meat of the answer to this question that you're asking. And we're also doing work with other organizations and groups that can help us learn from different environments. For example, outside of the clinical lab at Johns Hopkins, there are also people using psilocybin in a setting that's a group ceremony. You can imagine maybe a group of 6 people or 12 people or even 20 people sitting in a room with a guide who is obviously sober, not consuming the psilocybin, and that person can provide a safe environment and also make sure that the music and the sound is conducive to a productive session for these participants. There's a group that's operating in Holland called Synthesis Retreat, which is
fact,
providing, from what I hear. Yeah.
In fact, I know really well Martin, and because
Martijn, great.
he's been in the well, he will be in the podcast shortly, and one of his big investors, is one of my best friends, Eric Ruffel.
Oh, great. Yeah, I've talked to Martijn once. We had a great conversation, and we're looking forward to meeting soon, probably at the Horizons conference. I haven't sat through his sessions in Holland myself, but I've heard really great reports from others. So that's one that is obviously operating legally. I know that these types of circles are happening all over the world, and I think that there are certain countries and jurisdictions where those are happening completely legally, and then there are many places in the world, including in America, where that's happening underground. And the truth is that there are enough people who believe that using psilocybin can bring them real healing and real benefit. They're not using this medicine just for fun, or just to go to a concert, or to have some laughs with their friends. They're entering into a very grounded and quite a serious space to do personal growth work and or healing, and so they're taking the risk to break the law in doing that. And I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying anything personally about that, but it's happening all over the world. And what we need to recognize is that those people are at much higher risk of damage, or of potentially evoking ongoing pain or ongoing troubles from that experience, if they're not brought the educational kind of material, which is what we're looking to provide. And so there are a lot of resources online, but it's not that easy to discover what information is truthful and what information is just hearsay. And I think as we start to see the political environment changing, hopefully at an accelerating rate around the world, we're going to see better access to research, better access to this educational material, and even better access to the kind of expertise, the professional guidance that Synthesis Retreat is offering, and others in other parts of the world can offer. And the political shifts are worth talking about. As you mentioned at the beginning, I worked with the campaign group in Denver, and earlier this year we managed to pass the bill for Denver to become the first city to actively decriminalize mushrooms. And what that means is that doesn't mean they're legal. It doesn't mean that you can sell them, or that there will be stores, suddenly selling psychoactive mushrooms. What it means is that if somebody decides to grow psilocybin mushrooms, or if they have psilocybin mushrooms on their person, or even if they're actually using psilocybin mushrooms, the police have it as the lowest priority to enforce the law on those individuals. And what that does is it allows certain people who are experiencing deep pain or post-traumatic stress disorder, or other conditions that they believe mushrooms can be helpful for, it allows them to do that without the risk of being taken away from their families and put into jail. So it's an interesting step, I think, in the right direction. And meanwhile, there's some more structural work happening at the federal level. And I know that the Johns Hopkins team is quite intimately involved with the FDA in a long process of rescheduling psilocybin. Right now, it's at Schedule 1, which in America, that means that it's a drug that has, according to Schedule 1, no known medical benefit, and it has the potential to cause harm. That's not true about psilocybin. I mean, what's interesting is that is true about sugar, and yet sugar is everywhere, and
alcohol,
and yet it's right. And so these are interesting debates, which have been had many times. And in the UK, when the government was asked point blank, why is a psychedelic substance like LSD or psilocybin illegal, and seen as dangerous when alcohol is not. And the answer that the British government gave was that alcohol has a long-standing place in British history, which I think there are lots of things that have a place in history. That doesn't mean that, you know, it really should inform how we build our policies now, because we know more now. And so just as we can sort of recognize that mushrooms, psilocybin itself, can be used for many medical benefits, we also know that it doesn't necessarily cause harm. And so Schedule 4 is actually the better fit. And as I mentioned, Roland Griffiths and his team at Johns Hopkins are doing a lot of work with others to hopefully have that rescheduling take place. And that will open up the doors for a lot more research and hopefully a lot more professional guidance for individuals who will use psilocybin in the medical context or otherwise.
And David, I heard in an interview, I think it was in the SXSW with Tim Ferriss and Michael Pollan, that it hasn't been a single case where anybody could demonstrate that psilocybin has been dangerous or proven dangerous to human beings, or any test or any trial that is damaging psilocybin, which is amazing, right?
It's amazing, and it's true, yeah. The danger from psilocybin really comes when people are forced to use it in really bad situations because they don't have any other option. And that's the same with any medicine. I mean, we have a very lawful prescriptive mindset around all types of medicines, like pain relievers and headache medicines and you name it. And, you know, as with anything, any substance that alters our bodies or our minds needs to be used safely and responsibly. And when there's more education around that and more support services, then that's what can happen. But yeah, I mean, there was a report with a bar graph that was published. I can also send it to you if you wanted to put it in the show notes.
Please,
and it has a list. Yeah, absolutely. It has a list of the commonly used recreational drugs, ranging from alcohol to MDMA, to cocaine, to cannabis, and then others that people are less likely to have heard of, that are various different compounds and drugs. And that list has alcohol. The list categorizes the amount of harm caused to oneself and the amount of harm caused to others when using that drug. And at the very top of the list is alcohol, and at the very bottom of the list is mushrooms, meaning the mushrooms have a very tiny bar where there's maybe a few occasions that were recorded of people on mushrooms perhaps causing some kind of harm to others. There was no harm to self, but then you have alcohol at the very top of the list with this enormous bar, literally, I don't know, 5 or 8 times larger in terms of the amount of damage that people can cause and the amount of harm that people can cause to others. So it's interesting to put that in perspective. And when we took to the streets to talk to the residents of Denver about how they feel about the prospect of decriminalizing psilocybin mushrooms here, we obviously received a lot of different opinions and various perspectives that had been built up from whatever people had learned from their parents or from the magazines or newspapers or even books. And there's so much just incorrect information. And what I want really always to encourage is that I am not an expert in psychedelics by any means. I'm not an expert in psilocybin, and I'm not an expert in how these compounds affect the human body or our society. But I am really curious, and I've taken that curiosity to some pretty far extremes, both with my own personal experimentation and also with this work that I'm doing, and having my energy and my focus and my time spent on building this research group so that we can hopefully create a better environment in the future for ourselves and for our children to safely use these psychedelic medicines. I'm not still the expert, but I do really encourage everyone who's interested in this topic to get curious. And there's now more and more good literature out there that there's more information, more research that's been published, and I think you don't need to dig very far now to find the truth about why psychedelics were made illegal back in the 1900s, and also where their benefits can be, and also where a lot of the myths and the rumors are just incorrect. And it's unfortunate that, as we've seen with the fake news scandals and with the general political climate at the moment, people prefer to share negative stories and bad news, and often those are either incorrect or at least misrepresentative of the real truth. So I'm aware that psychedelics are still a contentious topic, and a lot of people still immediately on hearing about the topic have very reserved opinions, and I obviously respect that. And at the same time, I just encourage all of us to get more curious and to really want to receive the right information instead of just what's the most dramatic, shocking information.
And yeah, it's all about maintaining, keeping us occupied, so we don't need to think about the real problem, right?
Right.
David, what's the most influential book or the book that have had more impact on you on psychedelics?
There's one that comes straight to mind. I'm actually rereading it right now for the second time because I think it's really well written, and it's fascinating to provide a history throughout as long as we can record, or throughout as far back in history as the recordings will tell us. But it's called Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna, and it provides a really fascinating anthropological discoveries of where psilocybin and other psychedelics have been used throughout history for thousands and thousands of years, and also more recently in this last 100 or 200 years, how psychedelics have been appearing in our culture and what kind of shifts are happening. That book was written some time ago, I want to say several decades ago, so it's not as up to date as some people might like, but it certainly provides a beautiful kind of historical account of psychedelics in society. And then I think that there's a lot to be gained from the book you mentioned earlier. Michael Pollan's book is just so it's so grounded in the credibility that Michael Pollan has, that book has provided a shift in mindset. I mean, it's called How to Change Your Mind, but it's really allowed a lot of people who perhaps were more conservative or have traditionally held on to their belief system around drugs to release that and to recognize that Michael Pollan is somebody who is not coming from any hippie culture or from decades of recreational drug use or anything like that. As a middle-aged man, he decided to intelligently go about this inquiry into the psychedelic world and why it's becoming such a mainstream topic. And I think that book has done a really great thing for the conversation, and I know it's going to inspire many more books to come about.
And what was the thing, because you prior work were a co-founder of and CPO and Baker Technologies, and then how did you get involved in this, and what's the most important things you learned while you were at Baker Technologies before exited in the public offering?
The most important thing I learned is to never take a company public again. It took a full year and so much work, and huge gratitude to my partner Joel for really taking on the majority of that work, and also my other colleague Jeff, who just did you can't imagine maybe you can imagine this, right? You're one of the few people who I think works just as hard, but most people cannot imagine the amount of work and time it takes to take a company public. So that was a big ordeal, but really, the real answer is I had 4 years of learning how to build a piece of technology, an application that scaled to millions of users, and I got to experience, one user at a time, how those people were able to change their behaviors in a positive way. So they were able to accomplish something that they weren't able to accomplish before. And because we designed this tool, this product that made possible something new, a lot of people's lives were impacted. And I think I knew that I could do that with technology in my early 20s when I left architecture, and then I moved into the technology space, and I had this dream that if I could build software like Mark Zuckerberg built Facebook, then I would be able to offer something great to millions of people, whereas with most buildings, you can only impact some people, right? And for me, it was this idea of I can build software, then I can have an idea, and then it can offer value to the world in such a global way. That was really what excited me. And when we built Baker, we actually did that for the first time. And it was a really powerful moment for me when we reached our first million users, and I realized that dream was actually attainable and it was possible. So I really want to encourage all those technology entrepreneurs out there who are on version 5,000 of their app and they're still, working out the bugs and working out the business plan and everything and raising money, that it's worth sticking with it. I actually built 2 other technology companies before that ended up not being big successes, and it hurts a lot, but sticking with the core passion and recognizing that there's always another opportunity, there's always another audience, there's always more powerful value to offer to the world, that sticking with it is one of the best lessons that I've learned from my overall career in technology. And then to return to your question, within Baker, the unique outcome I had from that was working with our team. We built a team of close to 100 people, and I had never before had this opportunity to really understand how much personal care makes a difference to the overall worth of the company. And together with Jillian, who is our head of people operations, basically the office psychologist and office team coach, she and I were really closely linked, and we worked really hard, along with many other people I won't mention here. We worked really hard to prioritize this sense that each of the individuals in our team is a person. That's not a robot sitting in a seat to accomplish a task. That's a human being who I care about and who I want to learn about. I want to know, to the degree that they're comfortable sharing, what's going on in their lives, and how do they get excited in the morning, what makes them passionate about this task we're working on, and what are their challenges, and what are they not comfortable sharing with other people or even with me. Can we get into that and make a comfortable space for that to happen? And it might be a mundane answer, but I have to say the biggest thing for sure that I was able to take away from building Baker was this opportunity to work so closely with 100 people, and in a capacity where there was a reason for me to engage with almost all of them. And as we got bigger and bigger, I couldn't do that all the time with every single one, but it really taught me a lot about how so many different people operate in the workspace. And as I now move into a new team and building this new set of amazing individuals working on unlimited sciences, I feel much better positioned to hear them and to respect their different characters and skill sets and ideas.
David, what were the 2 projects you worked before, and what were the softwares you built in Baker Technologies? Because you mentioned 2 projects you were before that didn't work out, and then you were, which was the app or the software you built that you scaled to 1 million?
The software that scaled was Baker, and we reached, 2 or 3 million users, and it might be more by now, but we built the first online ordering tool for cannabis. And then after people started using that to order online, just the same way you could order takeout Chinese food online, we then built more tools for dispensaries. So analytics and loyalty engagement and text message marketing. So we built a lot of those kind of tools for dispensaries, and that as a package was a successful tech product. Before that, so the company before was called Zeus, and we built a browser for iPad specifically designed for touchscreen. And it was really that project that I think used my architectural mindset so much. It was really this completely novel way of approaching the task of searching information online. So you can imagine if you're searching for a piece of news or some information you want to find on your Chrome or your Safari or your Firefox browser. Right now you type in a search and Google has gotten very good at taking you to the right page. But back then Google wasn't as good, and also using the keyboard on an iPad is really has always been a bit of a pain point for the touchscreen users on the iPad. And so we designed a browser that was entirely intuitive and using touch gestures in the same way that if you use Google Maps or Google Earth, you can search for a name, but really if you're looking at the big Earth, circle on the screen, you can quickly just zoom in and say you're looking for, Central Park in New York. You can scroll in and you zoom in, you find the outline of America, the East Coast, outline of New York, and you zoom in and you find Central Park. And that use of the visual cortex to discover information in a visual context is so much faster. Our brains work so much faster on that level than processing the words that are involved in a keyword search, and that's actually using a sound system. So auditory senses are significantly slower in our mind's processing system than visual senses. And so basically redesigning the browser for the visual world. So we raised money for that company, had a really strong product, and eventually there were just some political constraints that Apple had put up that eventually unfortunately blocked us from being able to release the app on the App Store. So even though we had Apple's blessing at first, after 2 years of building this product and over $1 million investment, we had full green lights from Apple. At the last minute, they changed their mind, changed their guidelines, and they decided that they wouldn't launch that product on the App Store. So unfortunately, that was a tough blow, and as you can imagine, took some real camaraderie between Joel, my partner. Joel is my partner in my last 3 companies, Baker, and that one which was called Zeus, and also the previous one, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And I think one of the most powerful aspects of each of our careers has been the fact that we were by each other's sides working on each of those products and going through the tough times and going through the positive times as well.
Wow. What a story. And the second one.
And so the first one was not in technology. Really interesting, this topic of behavioral economics. It's a field of psychology that looks at why we make decisions, why we make specifically decisions around money or around negotiation or around the way that information is presented to us. We often actually make decisions that are quite irrational. They make no sense. And so I was very interested in that topic when I was new to New York, and I was exploring really psychology for the first time. I decided to, after leaving architecture, to start a conference company where we were bridging the gap between the psychology and behavioral economics researchers and the business community. So we only ran 2 conferences before deciding to move on to the Zeus project. But our first conference was a really beautiful audience of CEOs and executives from quite big companies, like the CMO of Walmart and C-level from Pepsi and people from JP Morgan and other big Fortune 1000 companies. And we had the professor from Yale who focuses on the psychology of negotiation. And it was fascinating. He had this group of top-level executives who you would think they know more than anyone else in the world about negotiation. And they're sitting in this audience like mouths, aghast, eyes open, just couldn't believe some of the information that this professor called Dalian Kane You can look him up. I believe he's still a professor at Yale, and he focuses on the psychology of negotiation specifically. That's all he researches in his career. And so you can imagine the incredible knowledge he was able to share about what it takes to sit in that at that negotiation table and have a successful outcome. And the successful outcome is not just getting what you want. It's also the nuances of getting most of what you want, but also making sure that the other person leaves that table feeling empowered and feeling like they had a fair deal outcome as well. And that was a really powerful experience to have at the very beginning of my career, to recognize that by bringing this really unknown information into the light and allowing more people to access it, that hopefully there were some really powerful benefits that could be brought to more and more people.
And David, thank you for taking us on this journey for the companies, which explains a lot of how you operate now, what you do. So we are going to jump to rapid fire questions, which is almost the last section of our interview. David, what's been your most successful failure?
Most successful failure was in my personal relationship. Am I allowed to give an answer in romance, or should it be a business?
For sure.
So I experimented with the world of polyamory for a little while, and I had a very beautiful, powerful relationship with my last partner. This was up to 5 to 6 years ago, and we decided to slowly open up our relationship. And this is a topic that's becoming more and more widely discussed and more popular, is this idea of non-monogamy or polyamory. And we were deciding that we would make it possible, make it allowed for us to be totally together, but also seeing other people. And that was successful for a little while, and then eventually it wasn't successful. And I would say ultimately there was a failure there. And moving into my current relationship, which started 2.5 years ago, I didn't know that I would want to change that. I thought that I would want to stay in that polyamorous mindset because there are many beautiful characteristics when it comes to the communication and trust and self-worth and sense of self-confidence, and so many things that I think those who are in polyamorous or non-monogamous relationships experience. I decided to let all of that go, and I decided to ask my partner Lana if she would be comfortable with us being monogamous, which for both of us was the alternative approach, because both of us had been polyamorous before, and we decided that we would be monogamous. And I haven't looked back since. It's been 2.5 years of only being in love with her, only having interest in this one woman, being so happy every day and every night. And for sure, it's been the most successful outcome from quote unquote failure.
I must say, I met Lana, and she is amazing too. So I give also a big hug and a big kiss from here.
Thank you.
What's been your most expensive success?
Well, most expensive success. Interesting. The answer I want to give is that I think with so I'll give some context. About 4 years ago, when I was offered to start this work in the cannabis industry and to build the Baker company, I actually wasn't a user of cannabis. I didn't want to engage with cannabis. I didn't personally have a story with it. I didn't have anyone in my family who was using it for medical reasons. So it was, for me, a big decision. Do I want to spend the years building a company in a space that isn't necessarily my forte. It's not somewhere that I can speak passionately and emotionally to the topic. And it was at that same time that I had started building my own experiences with psychedelics, specifically with psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD. And I believed that there was some benefit that could be brought to the world with these psychedelics. And I didn't know what it would be, but I knew that I was passionate about that topic. And every conversation I was having was when I was the most passionate, the most heartfelt. I just knew that there was something that I wanted to do in the world. And at the same time, 4 years ago, there was no place for a company or even really a nonprofit to do much in the space of psychedelics aside from the medical research. And that's not I'm not a medical researcher. So I saw the opportunity to build Baker as a really powerful stepping stone. I thought that if we can help in any way with the cannabis industry moving forward, then at some point in the future, there will be a better foundation for the same types of people to discuss other psychedelics. And sure enough, 4 years later, there's this incredible conversation happening around psychedelics and especially psilocybin. And I'm, as I was hoping and as I predicted, I'm better positioned now to build what I'm really passionate about. And so the 4 years that I spent building Baker is 4 years that was quite expensive. It took my 26 to 30-year-old self into a whole world and a whole journey that I didn't necessarily know I wanted to sign up for, but it's so successful where it's brought me now the ability that I have to speak more confidently to this topic and to know really how beneficial these plant medicines can be in so many different ways. I would say is a huge success.
Brilliant answer. Brilliant answer. David, following the 2, 3, 4 rapid fire questions, what would you say if you had to say your dream out loud? What would be this dream?
My dream is to walk through a day in my life and just be aware everyone I interact with, everyone I encounter is healthy and happy and free from trauma or suffering and able to be their most powerful, beautiful selves. And to be able to just intuitively sense that from everyone that I experience, as well as from myself throughout that day, that feels like a really beautiful day.
It's just beautiful. What's your most powerful core skill?
I think I have an intuitive skill to be able to understand other people's perspectives and to really wear those perspectives myself. As far as I'm aware, this is whatever's in my blind spot, I don't know, but as far as I'm aware, when somebody shares their opinion or their perspective with me, I feel very comfortable getting inside their mind, understanding where they're coming from, understanding the whole history behind why they might believe the world is that way or have that perspective. And even if I don't agree, I can try it on, I can understand it and at least have a patient dialogue around it. And I'm still working on that. I'm not perfect, but I do think it's a really powerful skill and one that serves me every day.
And if you have to name a habit which is essential for you, which will be this habit?
Be curious.
Okay. And what has been your biggest challenge up until now?
So it's such an interesting one because every challenge I think of, I can think of why it's been so amazing in my life, or why it's provided so much value, or shown me the lessons that I needed. So there's no bad challenges in my life that I can think of, but
Well, what is your challenge right now? The biggest challenge right now for you?
biggest challenge, yeah, that's a better way of framing it. I am every day grappling with this challenge of doing something that is not only it's a topic that's highly illegal, but also highly contentious, and recognizing that, kind of as I pointed out in a previous answer, the time it takes and the work it takes and the patience it takes to understand so many different perspectives and so many individual experiences surrounding the topic of psychedelics is it's work I enjoy, it's work I'm honored to be doing, and it's work I know is a challenge. So I need to keep working on it and not ever get to a point where I assume I understand or assume that somebody else is wrong. And especially when it comes to this concept of the echo chamber, there's so much likelihood that everyone who's around me, my friends, my colleagues, the individuals who are making the podcasts that I listen to and writing the articles that I choose to read, they probably agree with most of what I would say. And so I'm prone to getting this echo chamber effect where I get this reinforced sense that what I think is correct. And I think a big challenge for me is to make sure that I'm going outside of my own constraints. And working with a topic like psychedelics, it's my challenge to engage with more people who are in the Republican sphere, or more people who are in developing countries that haven't yet received as much information about psychedelics, or perhaps have different perspectives based on their own cultures or their own situational belief systems. And I'm embracing that challenge, but I'm certainly far away from accomplishing anything around it.
And David, last but not least, what will be your non-requested advice that you will give to anyone who is listening to this podcast?
You're asking for number one piece of advice?
No, I would say, sorry, non-requested advice, because no one is requesting the advice, yeah? But what will be your most personal, deep, intimate, non-requested advice for anyone listening to this podcast?
I was close to saying something about meditation, but I'm not going to say that. It comes down to love. It comes down to love, and specifically relationship. And if there's one thing I've learned from this last couple of years, and so much has happened from exiting my company to moving into this whole new industry to developing completely different foundation in my social life, the biggest shift has been that the relationship I'm in right now, every single day, is my greatest support. And I've obviously talked about Lana a couple of times on this podcast, and hope that's a sign that my relationship is really the most important aspect of how I live my life. Even though I can place my priorities elsewhere when I need to, everything I do and the sense of how I'm doing them, and the sense that the way I'm operating is supported and loved and cared for, is something that I thank Lana and I thank my relationship for. And so my number one piece of advice is to invest in relationship, and whether that's with a wife or a husband, or with a partner that you don't know yet whether they're going to be around for a while. It takes real work to invest in that relationship and not just fall into the same patterns that our parents did, not the same patterns that most of people through history did, which is after the honeymoon period's over, then it's nagging and bickering and falling into these sort of downward spiral negative conversational loops. And if we all invest in love, then I think we can accomplish a hell of a lot for the world and amongst ourselves.
Love is the mightiest thing will be. David, is there anything else you want to add?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, really wonderful questions, and I appreciate this opportunity to share a little bit about myself with your audience. And I would like to say that if anyone is interested in learning more about psychedelics, or specifically about psilocybin,
I was going to ask.
Unlimited Sciences. Great, yeah, thank you. So unlimitedsciences.org is our website, unlimitedsciences.org, and that has a research page which shows a lot of the ongoing medical research, as well as an opportunity to become a part of our community and to see how you could be involved. And if there's anything that I can offer or provide to any of your listeners, please know that I'm here to be a resource and a supporter.
I know that is true. So, David, where people can find you on online?
I don't really do much social media. I stopped really posting on social media about 2.5 years ago, and I've just posted once or twice since then. But David Champion on Facebook, and I don't really use Twitter, but I am DS_champion on Instagram, and you can reach me anytime using the email address david@unlimitedsciences.org to discuss the project.
David, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your knowledge, sharing the experience of your personal life, your professional journey, and helping us to understand psilocybin, to understand relationship, to understand, how to design a user experience for, something like cannabis. Also, like your vulnerability, your sensibility, your human touch, in order to tackle any question, anything, and any perspective. No doubt that this is a really, really, really enlightening experience, and it enriches us. And thank you for being in Disrupt Everything podcast series, and also thanks for giving us the gift of yourself. We are really, really touched, at least me, and also inspired by what you are accomplishing and how you are approaching the world and everything.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This feeling is definitely mutual, and I respect what you're doing for the world so much. Really tremendous congratulations on what you've built and what you're continuing to offer. So thank you for having me as part of your community, and I'm excited to continue to get to know everyone that's surrounding you.
Absolutely. I hope we can catch up anytime soon in person. Sure we will.
Absolutely. I would love that.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Well. There's been David Champion. This is why I wanted to have him here. It's been a long time since we were trying to be in the podcast. Now we're trying to fit dates, and finally made it, and it's been worth. So now my final message is for you. I hope you can use at least one thing about what we discussed, about what David shared, and take it into action. Just put it into the world and make something that really resonates on you and on other people, and you at least share it with one person. That I'm not sharing. I'll never say, subscribe or share or give a review. Just make anything useful with what you learned. That will be our ROI most crucial. So I hope you've been disrupted, because if not, you haven't been disrupted, someone or something will come and will disrupt you. This is Disrupt Everything podcast series. I'm your host, Isra García.
Esto ha sido Disrupt Everything by Isra García. Encuentra el riesgo antes de que el riesgo te encuentren a ti.
Hey, gracias por llegar hasta aquí, por escuchar este podcast, ver este vídeo y sumarte a la liga del 1%, esa que marca la diferencia en el 99% restante. Gracias por tú, tal y como eres, tal y como ocurres. Te reto y te incito a que utilices una sola cosa de lo que has escuchado, visto en este podcast para tu vida, para impactar, para servir, para jugar, para practicar, para amar, para vivir, que es para lo que estamos aquí. Trabajar con excelencia, sí. Producir con excelencia, sí. Pero vivir con excelencia. Si esto ha resonado contigo, te espero en los nuevos episodios. Te espero en la Liga del 1%, la comunidad que poco a poco voy a empezar a construir con muchas cosas que no voy a desvelar, pero vas a vivir, tanto presenciales como online, tanto para tu vida, como para tu profesión, como para tu familia, como para tus negocios. Puedes suscribirte abajo en la descripción y un favor. Voy a pedirte que si escuchas este podcast en YouTube, que vayas a Spotify o Apple Podcast, si utilizas alguno de ellos, te suscribas al podcast y dejes una valoración y una reseña, porque eso nos ayudará a llegar a todavía más personas. Este podcast ha alcanzado más de 6 millones de escuchas y más de 300.000 descargas al mes. Mi trabajo es seguir haciéndolo sin publicidad, sin pretender obtener nada más que esto. Para mí la acción, hacerlo, estar aquí es la propia realización, es el propio resultado, la propia recompensa, el haber impactado a cientos de miles de personas que ya están reinventándose a sí mismas. Si no utilizas ninguna de estas dos plataformas, deja un comentario aquí de qué te ha parecido, de cómo lo has vivido. Es importante porque tú cuentas, porque todo cuenta, porque cada instante es la gran victoria. Cada ser vivo es la gran victoria, cada uno de nosotros, cada movimiento, cada pensamiento, aunque no lo creamos, es la gran victoria de las victorias. Gracias y vamos a seguir haciendo que las cosas sucedan, bailando con el momento, reinventándonos y utilizando la disrupción positiva para cambiar todo lo que importa. Vamos a ello.